Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, this is going to be episode 4 of our Midnight Preparation series, and this is going to be our deep dive into jewel crafting. A lot of people have been requesting this profession, and I am also very excited about this profession. I think jewel crafting can be a great gold making opportunity in Midnight, but I have to admit there are some weird, funky things with this profession in this latest expansion. Some of the specialization changes and the recipe changes they've made are a little bit weird, and I'm still trying to figure them out myself, so hopefully in today's video I can kind of warn you about those things, but also show you that there is a ton of opportunity as well. As always, this is going to be a longer video where we're going to be going over some pros and cons, some basics of jewel crafting, recipes, leveling, and then we're going to get into specializations, so feel free to use the timestamps down below to skip to whatever section you want most. Of course, feel free to check the playlist of this series, as I might have already covered a profession that you want to see, and if not, that profession is definitely coming soon. But as always, everybody, thank you guys so much for your support, and let's get into jewel crafting. Now, I think the biggest pro of jewel crafting is the mass crafting capabilities. If you are somebody who is okay with AFK crafting, you leave your computer on for a little bit while you work on something else, maybe you go make dinner, or maybe you pull up a side screen and watch a movie, something like that. If you like to chill in the main city and do a lot of AFK crafting, jewel crafting is for you. Inherently just built into the profession, you have prospecting as well as gem crushing, which are two sort of shuffles if you think about it. Prospecting, you're buying ore and turning it into gems, and that's kind of dealing with some RNG drop chance scenarios. And then of course, crushing is turning those unwanted cheap gems into the gem dust, which then can be used for crafting. But outside of shuffling, you also just have everything else that can be mass crafted. Jewel crafting is known for its variety of reagents that are used within the profession itself, as well as other professions like alchemist relying on vials made by jewel crafting. And then the most obvious thing, you have gems, which of course are mass crafted and wanted by a lot of players. So really the biggest pro to jewel crafting here is if you like mass crafting and you prefer that, that is definitely something to look forward to in Midnight. Now, the con of all of this is that if you are somebody who prefers work orders, jewel crafting is probably not the best profession for you. Of course, there are necklaces as well as rings, which always, people need necklaces and rings, so there are some opportunity there, but if you are trying to pick one single profession, for example, you're probably better off picking an armor profession than jewel crafting for work orders, just because you have a lot more diversity. Like many other professions, you also have the ability to craft profession equipment for other players, but yet again, there's probably a better option out there if you are limited in character space. Of course, if you're picking up all professions and you prefer work orders, go for it. Jewel crafting can definitely probably bring you some gold. I personally just don't really focus on the work order side of things, so I'm much more excited about the mass crafting and reagent side of jewel crafting. But that's kind of my quick pros and cons for jewel crafting, and let's dive in game and take a look at some recipes. Up first, as always, we have our profession equipment for jewel crafting, and it is just like the War Within. One of your accessories is going to come from jewel crafting, meaning you can either purchase this or craft this yourself. Secondly, you're going to have your cover, which is your second accessory, and that will come from leatherworking. So either have a leatherworking ult or just simply buy this from a leatherworker. And then lastly, your tool is going to come from engineering. So you can technically self-sustain with one accessory, but you'll need to find a leatherworker and an engineer to get yourself your other profession equipment. Now, taking a look at recipes, jewel crafting is very, very similar to the War Within. You're really going to see the same type of items as before. Up first, you have your basic jewel crafting mechanics, which is crushing and prospecting. Everybody is pretty much familiar with prospecting at this point. That is just turning 5 ore into a variety of gems. And then you have crushing, which we did see in the War Within, but you basically can choose one of your unwanted gem types, and then you will have to use some stone, which is a byproduct of prospecting, and you'll crush these unwanted items into gem dust. We'll talk about this more and talk about prospecting and crushing during the prospecting specialization tree, so feel free to skip to that section if you want to know more. For now, let's move on to the other recipes. In terms of crafting reagents, these are the reagents that come from trainer-learned recipes. Up first, we have the kaleidoscopic prism, which is kind of your high-end crafting reagent for jewel crafting. Majority of your high-end jewel crafting crafts, like the various amulets and various rings and all of that you can craft, require this as a crafting reagent. So this is going to be very similar to kind of the prism and other items we saw in the War Within. Up next, you have your Sindori lens, which yet again is used in a lot of handful jewel crafting recipes. This is a lot cheaper, but it's one of those mass crafting reagents that you can definitely specialize in. Then lastly, probably the most popular reagent that you're going to have is the sunglass vial, which of course is used by alchemists, and everybody's going to want to get their hands, especially on the high quality versions of these, so we'll talk about that more in specializations. Then moving on to other trainer-learned recipes, we basically just have every single type of cut gem. There are 4 main basic gems in Midnight, and what you're going to see is the Peridot, you're going to see Amethyst, Garnet, as well as Lapis, and basically there is the green uncommon version of those, and then there is the better rare version, which are all the flawless versions. And you'll see here that, for example, these powerful Peridots, there are 5 recipes right here. The bottom 4 being the basic version, and this simply just requires the green or the uncommon version of that gem, as well as some gem dust. And if we take a look here, the quick Peridot, for example, is going to give you 7 haste at a quality 1, and this is just different sort of stack combinations. Of course, the best in slot list, whenever they come out at release, is going to be your best friend to figure out what gems are best in slot. But that is the theme really for all of these gems, and then you will get one flawless recipe from the trainer, and this is kind of your higher end version. So if we take a look, we have the quick Peridot right here, which is giving 7 haste, and if we take a look at the flawless version, it's getting 12 haste instead. However, it is a lot more expensive to craft, as it requires 5 gem dust, it requires one of the flawless gems, as well as some extra crafting reagents that drop from the world, including roots, as well as those motes of primal energies, which we've seen in other professions. And that same thing applies, we have the lapis versions right here, and then we have the amethyst versions as well as the garnet versions. I'm not necessarily going to go through every single one. They are listed on Wowhead if you do want to see exactly what these stat combinations are, but this is pretty much the generic sort of cut gems that you see in every expansion. Up next, we have our basic trainer-learned ring right here, the copper band, very, very cheap. Secondly, we have the basic necklace right here, which is very cheap. The nocturnal charm, which once again is very cheap to craft. And then we have our 4 profession equipment accessories that we can craft. These are our 4 basic versions. So we have the Bold Biographer's bifocals. That is a tongue twister. I don't think I could say that again. Bold Biographer's, yeah, I can't say that 3 times fast. But this is your inscription accessory. Then you have the Fantastic Font Focuser. I can say that one, which is another inscription accessory. Then you have the Silver Moon Focusing Shard, which is for enchanting, as well as the Silver Moon Loops, which is also for yourself. That is the jewel crafting accessory. Moving on, we have something called Jeweler's Jest, which is kind of seems to be some sort of cosmetic / fun item. I have a feeling this is probably tied to some fancy quest or maybe some sort of treasure or something in the world. This is really cheap to craft. It's very easy. This is actually very good for leveling your profession, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is just kind of a fun item that you have, and that is it for trainer-learned recipes. In terms of all the non-trainer learned recipes, there are quite a few. Up first, we have the 2 other reagents, and these are optional reagents. So these are embellishments that you can apply to gear. So this one right here, feel free to read it. This is the Focusing Iris, which is a drop from a boss. And then you have the Stabilizing Gemstone, which is yet again another embellishment, and this comes from heavy trunks around the world. And then going back to cut gems, these are the more powerful flawless gems, and these are all unlocked through specializations. We'll talk more about it whenever we get to the specialization section, but basically every single type of gem has a dedicated subnode within the profession, and that is how you're going to unlock all these recipes. You'll see here by just unlocking Deadly Period, you'll get this recipe. This comes from Masterful Period, and then this right here comes from Versatile Period. So this is simply a dedicated node for every single sort of craft. And once you put enough points inside of a specific subnode, you'll get the prism, which is just something that you can craft, and you'll open it up and you'll get a handful of that sort of gem. These also existed in the War Within. I have to admit, they weren't that great, but it is something that you can do and get some sort of first time craft bonus, which is just some extra knowledge points as you unlock these. But that same sort of thing applies for lapis, amethyst, and garnets. And then we have our new meta gem, which are called the Eversong Diamonds. This is basically the replacement for Blasphemite from the War Within, and this uses the more expensive gem that's going to come out of prospecting called Eversong Diamonds. And we have the 4 versions here, which of course is just stat based, so this gives you plus 26 primary stat as a quality 1. The powerful one gives you some primary stat as well as some critical strike bonuses. The stoic one gives you armor as well as primary stat. And then lastly, the telluric, something like that, gives you more primary stat and also maximum mana. Now, unlike the other cut gems, these are actually not tied to specializations, and all of them are drops from Midnight Dungeons. So you're going to definitely want to be on the lookout for them as you are leveling up your character, but don't worry, these should be BOE recipes. So if you don't want to run dungeons yourself, you can simply just buy the recipe off the auction house. I believe I did that for the War Within, and of course it's going to depend on your server and all of that, but it should be relatively cheap. You shouldn't have to fork out a fortune, and if you're okay with waiting a few days or a week or so as prices die down, they really should not be that hard to get. Continuing on, we have our basic PvP recipes, so these include some PvP focused gems, so you have 3 of those, as well as the PvP necklace and the PvP ring. All of these are purchased from the PvP vendor for a handful of honor. Then we have our high-end rings. A lot of these come from Renown or are purchased from various vendors. So right here we have the Loa's Worshipper's Band. We have the Masterwork Band, which comes from Specializations. And then we have the Blessing Signet, which also comes from Renown. And you'll see that all of these require sparks because they are BOP, meaning you'll have to either obtain these if you want them for yourself through the crafting order system, or you'll be selling them through work order commissions. Up next, we have the necklaces. So this one comes from Specializations, the Masterwork Amulet. Then we have the Thalassian Twerk, which also is a boss drop. And lastly, you have the Voidstone Array, which is another boss drop as well. Moving on, we are almost done, and this is the remaining profession equipment. So we have the rare version of all of the equipment, and this is simply a purchase from the Artisan Moxie vendor inside of Silvermoon City. Basically, inside of Silvermoon, you have your profession trainer, and then you have your profession supplies vendor, and that vendor sells all of your certain, Moxie-related recipes. So in order to get these rare equipment pieces, you will be spending 150 Moxie each. And so that is the magnifying glass for inscription, that's the enchanter's crystal for enchanting, you have your better version of your jewelry item right there, and then also you have the scribe spectacles, all coming from that one vendor. Then moving on, you have the epic qualities as well, which are also a vendor-learned recipe. Same thing, costing 150 Moxie each. So you have, once again, just the other versions. You can pause and take a look at these recipes if you like as well. Then lastly, we have the remaining housing decor. Like all the other crafting professions, Jewelcrafting is getting a handful of new profession decor recipes, and if we take a look, a lot of these are just renown related, random drops, things like that, and 2 of them are actually profession trainers. If we take a look at the Jewelcrafting trainer right here, you will learn the Brilliant Harp as well as this other profession decor at skill level 80. So 2 of them come from the trainer, while the rest of them have some variety of sources. So yeah, that's it for recipes. It looks like there's a ton, and technically there is, but a lot of them are just the various versions of cut gems, so I would not say Jewelcrafting is that complex. I think it's pretty basic, and that also means all of these different sort of gems is going to be great bonuses for those first time craft knowledge points. Just make sure as you're leveling the profession, as you're unlocking things, just try to always craft 1 of each, and that's going to grant you a lot of knowledge points that you can use towards your specializations. Now, in terms of leveling, jewel crafting is a little bit more tricky compared to the other two professions that we've covered, which is enchanting and tailoring, and that's because at about 70, you have to stop relying on trainer-learned recipes. When you first pick up jewel crafting, you'll be able to do prospecting to get your first kind of beginner level nodes of skill, and then you'll be able to switch over to these uncommon gem cuts. There are a lot of them. You'll just pick the cheapest at the time, and they should be relatively cheap. It simply costs 1 gem dust, as well as 1 uncut gem, and if you take a look at my inventory, I crafted about 7 of the lapises and about 11 or so garnets, so that should be pretty easy. Then once I hit the 50 mark or so, I could actually use the chalice craft, which is kind of this weird cosmetic sort of item right here. This simply just requires 2 glass, which should be pretty easy to get. It comes from prospecting, but I was able to craft 15 of these, and that kind of got me to the 60, 65-ish mark. And then kind of from there, I was stuck crafting the flawless gems, which are a little bit more expensive. This is when things are going to start getting pricey, but you can craft a handful of these flawless gems, and currently I am at 70 out of 100, and as you can see, I technically can continue to craft these flawless cuts, but they are a green arrow, meaning I'm going to have to craft a lot, and this will probably cap out at about 75. In my inventory, you'll see I already crafted about 22 flawless cuts, so that definitely gets more on the expensive side. Outside of the trainer-learned recipes, there are quite a few options, but it really just depends on the sort of gameplay style you're going for. For example, the stabilizing gemstone is an embellishment that is going to probably be relatively cheap compared to other items. It simply just requires the uncommon gems as well as a handful of gem dust, and this will actually get you all the way to 100. At about 80, it will turn yellow, at about 90, it will turn green, and then of course it will cap out at 100, but technically you could mass craft this. The only downside is that it is a dropped recipe, meaning you'll have to pick it up from the auction house or go get it yourself, and that could be a pricey investment on its own. The fastest way to level will probably be through Eversong Diamonds, which of course you will have to get the recipe from a dungeon drop, but these will also be pretty pricey because they are diamonds and they require the kaleidoscopic prisms, which are probably going to be expensive in on themselves. So if you have unlimited gold or millions of gold and you're not really worried about spending, you could hike this and, spend and craft all of this all the way up to 100. If you're somebody going into work orders and you're going to unlock either the necklaces or the gems anyways, you can use that. Of course, you're limited by sparks, so you'll have to use either other people's sparks or your alt sparks. Then lastly, potentially your best option, this is going to spend your artisan moxie, and at the current moment, crafting profession tools don't require artisan moxie, so of course, if that is something added, this would no longer be the case. But if you have some extra artisan moxie laying around, you can pick up one of the rare profession equipment recipes. This is going to cost you 150 artisan moxie, but currently the craft itself doesn't require any moxie, meaning you can mass craft these and these should take you all the way to 100. So if you're okay with investing a little bit of moxie there, definitely pick up one of the rare versions and use that to hit 100. But yeah, that's about it for leveling and kind of the overviews of jewel crafting. Everything right now seems pretty squared away, but let's flip over to some specializations and start getting into some of the funky things happening with jewel crafting in Midnight. Up first, we're going to cover probably what most people are looking at, and that is prospecting as well as crushing gems. In my inventory, you're going to see kind of a breakdown of all of the different jewel crafting items, and so for prospecting, you have 4 different types of ore. We have our basic ore, which we have our copper ore. Of course, remember all of the materials are either quality 1 or quality 2. Then we have our tin ore as well as our silver ore, and this is kind of our 3 main ores in the expansion. Then we have a rare ore, which is called the Dazzling Thorium, and this actually does not have quality. There is only one version of it. It's not either quality 1 or 2. It is simply just called Dazzling Thorium. And these are the 4 things that you can prospect in Midnight. In terms of what you're going to get out of prospecting is the different gems that we saw earlier in the recipes. We have the uncommon cuts, so we have the amethyst, we have garnet, we have the peridot, as well as the lapis, and then we have the rare versions, which is the flawless versions of all of them. So we have flawless lapis, we have flawless peridot, we have flawless garnet, as well as flawless amethyst, and that's going to be the main outcomes of prospecting. In terms of kind of the byproducts of prospecting, we have the dusk-shrouded stone, which are used in a variety of recipes, but this is kind of just a cheaper byproduct that you're going to get, as well as the crystalline glass, which is going to be used in those vial recipes, but that is yet again just another byproduct of prospecting ore. Now, of course, the chase out of prospecting is going to be the new Eversong Diamond, which is going to be used to craft those meta gems, and this is going to be your very expensive sought-after gem in prospecting. Now, as you prospect, you're going to get a load of these gems, and a lot of these recipes require gem dust, meaning what you're going to have to do is then go into crushing, or of course, buy the gem dust off the auction house, but crushing takes in some of those dusk-shrouded stone, so that byproduct of prospecting, you'll use it here, and then you have to simply pick some sort of unused gem that you don't mind losing. If we pick a uncommon cut, so if we pick the amethyst, for example, this is just one of the green quality, and we decide to start crushing this, you'll see that for the most part, we're going to get a lot of single dust, as well as anywhere between 2 and 3 when we get lucky. Of course, at the end of the day, this is RNG, and this is kind of when your prospecting and your crushing calculators come to play. We just got very lucky with a lot of 3s in the row, but you'll see we'll get anywhere between 1 to 3 gem dust as we crush. And if we compare that to crushing a rare gem, you'll see that we also have the same sort of rates between 1 to 3, but it seems to be more common that you'll get kind of the 2 to 3 procs instead of the 1 procs. I haven't done any super big math, and a lot of things are still changing around prospecting and stuff like that, so I wouldn't take any rates as like perfect going into launch, but generally it's going to be that the cheaper gems are going to give you anywhere between 1 to 3, with mostly giving you 1s and 2s, while the more expensive gems, the flawless versions, are going to give you 1 to 3, but mostly the 2s or 3s. But you will see here that crushing as well as prospecting has skill involved, and that's when specializations come to play. And this is where the first really weird thing has happened for jewel crafting. At the time of recording this video, just a few hours earlier, there was a hotfix for jewel crafting, which shaved basically 120 knowledge points from the prospecting build. Originally, the nodes that you see here that currently have 1 out of 1 knowledge points used to be 30 knowledge point nodes, meaning you would need 120 knowledge points to get all 4 sub nodes. However, the hotfix that just happened completely wiped that off, and now each node only requires 1 knowledge point. So this is one of the weird things that has just happened, but let's dive into actually what this specialization is doing. First things first, if you are somebody, regardless of if you want to prospect or you want to crush, your primary focus for skill is going to be in Proficient Processor. The main node right here, the Proficient Processor node, requires 30 skill points, and every single point you put in is going to give you skill towards prospecting, crushing, as well as creating reagents. You'll also get a variety of other things as you put more points in. As example, you'll get +5 skill, you'll get some resourcefulness, you'll get some multi-craft, ingenuity, etc. The last one is very nice because crafting, prospecting, and crushing, you'll actually get a speed boost, which is very nice. And of course, you get that concentration bonus, which is going to be very, very good if you do want to do concentration crafts. From here, you have an option to make. The bottom node right here is for crushing, meaning if you are somebody who is simply making a gemstone crushing alt, all you need to do is put 30 points into Proficient Processor, then put 40 points into Crushing Connoisseur, and your crushing build is complete. That's 70 knowledge points, and that is pretty simple to do. This node is going to give you a skill point for every single knowledge point you put in, as well as a handful of skill bonuses and other stat bonuses throughout this tree, with the final one giving you a huge +20 skill, and you'll also be able to consume less concentration, which is great for those concentration crafters. If you're somebody diving into the prospecting side of things, you can technically ignore crushing unless you're going to do both on the same character, but you want to go to the left side of the tree instead and go into Prospecting Pro. This is 30 knowledge points, and this is going to give you a skill for every point that you put in. And also, yet again, you'll just get a variety of bonuses. There's some more skill, more skill, more skill, and lastly, you'll get a big 20% prospecting speed boost, which is very great for all of the AFK crafting, and you'll see that whenever you find a gem while prospecting, you have a chance to find an additional gem. So yet again, your yields per prospecting is just going to be better as you max this out. From here, because of the hotfix, you're practically done. Because you max out this node, you're going to be able to pick up all 4 of these sub nodes, and currently they cost 1 point each. They don't grant you any skill or anything like that, but they are going to improve your ability to get the Eversong diamonds when prospecting. So each one is dedicated to the different ore that we covered earlier. So right here, you'll have an extremely rare chance of finding Eversong diamonds while prospecting copper. Same thing here for tin, same thing here for silver, and lastly, same thing here for thorium. So if you unlock all of those, it's going to cost 4 knowledge points, and then you're good to go. So in total, if you are going for a prospecting only build, that's going to require 64 knowledge points. And if you want to add crushing on top of that, that will be 104 knowledge points. So you can either decide to go for it on the same character, or if you have multiple characters, you can do 1 and 1. It really just depends on how fast you want to max out these different things. Now, besides specializations, of course, we need to talk about skill as well. Unlocking this tree just how it is right now will get you close to being able to guarantee quality 2s, but not fully. If we go back here, if we try to prospect a quality 2 reagent, you'll see that we are missing 40 skill, and that is because I am missing the profession equipment. Meaning if you are somebody who is going to max out this craft, you're going to want to make sure you get the rare or epic versions of that profession equipment as fast as possible, as they'll grant you that rest of the 40 skill that you need. And of course, you can choose to use your concentration if you want. I probably would not recommend it. I'd probably spend it on something else like one of the cut gems, but that is something that you can potentially do. And same thing goes for crushing. If you take a look here, if we pick the best quality reagents, you'll see that I'm missing that 40 skill yet again. So even though my specialization is maxed out, I need that profession equipment to put me over that threshold to make sure I can guarantee that quality too. Now, moving on from just prospecting, let's quickly take a look at the generic Jewelcrafting node, because if you take a look over here, you'll see that ingenuity as well as resourcefulness can be used for crushing and prospecting. So let's talk about the generic and fundamentals of Jewelcrafting next. That tree is going to be the thoughtful throughput, and of course, I'm talking about this now, but remember, regardless of what specialization you're going to, you'll likely want to put some points into this tree. If we unlock it, the first thing that you see here is going to give you a lot of ingenuity. Every single point that you put into thoughtful throughput, you're going to get 2 ingenuity and a variety of bonuses. Just by unlocking this tree, you're going to spend 2% less concentration for every single Jewelcrafting craft, which is very, very good. When you put 10 points in, you'll consume even less. Yet again, you'll get even more bonuses once you put 20 points in. And then lastly, once you max it out, you'll be able to craft everything 15% faster, and you'll also gain another ingenuity bonus. Then the 3 subnodes that you have tied to this tree is just for your different profession stats. So to the left side, we have the resourcefulness stat, which is called skilled savings, and this is going to give you resourcefulness for every single point that you put into the specialization. And as you fill this out, you'll gain even more resourcefulness-based bonuses. This allows you to refund more items. This gives you just overall more resourcefulness. You can pause and read these if you want, but they're all resourcefulness bonuses, with the ending giving you 25% more materials. So for example, if you are somebody going prospecting, you'll likely also want to max out this tree, since resourcefulness can be used for prospecting as well as crushing, and that can save you a lot of gold per craft. The middle node is your multi-craft node, so outrageous output is for all of your multi-craft needs, so this is just going to grant you more items whenever multi-craft procs, as well as having a higher chance of multi-craft procking. This isn't directly related to prospecting or anything, since multi-craft doesn't apply, but if you're somebody crafting reagents or crafting gems, this is 100% going to be something you want to go into. Multi-craft is always better than resourcefulness whenever multi-craft can proc. And then lastly, you have your dedicated concentration node. So this is going to allow you to get more concentration whenever Ingenuity procs, as well as some other bonuses. Feel free to pause and read them if you like. But if you are somebody who's going to pick up Jewelcrafting to do concentration crafts, whether that's prospecting concentration or the cut gem concentration, or even using concentration to craft armor, that is the dedicated tree that you also want to max out as well. But there you go, you're not going to get any skill bonuses from this tree, but if you're looking for resourcefulness, ingenuity, as well as multicraft, this is the generic tree that you're going to want to put points in, regardless of where you want to go. Moving on to kind of the other part of jewel crafting, we have all of the accessory-based crafts. So this is your necklaces, these are your rings, as well as your profession equipment, and this is all crammed into one specialization called alluring accessories. The top node is just going to be a generic skill node for all three types of items. As you put more points into this, you're going to get skill as well as some other bonuses, very similar to the other main node that we saw, with the last one giving you crafting speed as well as consuming less concentration on accessory-based crafts. And then you have a decision to make based on the type of equipment you're crafting. The right node, which is crafting contour, that's going to be dedicated to all of your profession items. So this is going to give you a bunch of skill when crafting profession accessories and tools, as well as some other bonuses. Yet again, feel free to pause. But if you're somebody simply just going to craft profession accessories, what you would want to do is max out the middle node for 30 points, then max out crafting contour for 40 points, and that's it. That's the only thing you need to touch in this tree. Then of course, you should probably go to the generic tree, and let's say you're going to do concentration, max out concentration, and then you're good to go. And of course, you'll work on some resourcefulness when you get the other points as well, but that's all. You don't have to touch any other specializations. Similarly, let's say you're going for lockets, so you're doing necklaces crafting, you're going to want to go for the main node yet again, and then simply just go into luxurious lockets, and that's going to give you the same skill bonuses as well as stat bonuses. And then finally at the end, you'll get a big skill bonus as well as use less concentration. So if you want to go strictly for necklaces, you just go for the main node as well as this node, go to the generic tree, and boom, you're done. Then lastly, the same thing applies for regal rings. Of course, this is focused on your crafting rings, so you'll gain a bunch of skill, and then of course at the very end, you'll get the big skill bonus as well as concentration bonuses. So regardless, if you're doing anything accessory based, this is going to be the tree for you, and you're basically just looking at two nodes. Then second to last, we have our reagent crafting. I'm saving something for the end because it's funky and weird, but let's quickly cover reagents. If you're somebody who wants to craft reagents, you are going to kind of finish the other side of the prospecting tree. So in Proficient Processor, that main node is going to give you skill and other bonuses when crafting reagents. So that is very good to max out. And then you're going to want to go into Material Manufacturer, which is going to give you that more skill, as well as some other more dedicated bonuses. Boom, once again, feel free to pause if you'd like. And then you have a simple decision to make. 99% of people, when they think about crafting reagents, they think about crafting the Sendai lenses as well as the vials for Alchemist, and if doing so, you're going to want to go into Boldly Basic, which is that basic reagents node. So every single point that you put in is going to give you skill bonuses. It requires 30 knowledge points, and you'll get a other handful of skill as you put more and more points. Then lastly, you'll get a big boost, and you'll also be able to use less concentration. And this will be basically it if you are somebody who's crafting vials. The other subnode, the optionally optimal, is for your optional reagents. So this is like your embellishments and things like that. So if you are somebody who wants to go into that sort of crafting, that is the skill node for you. But most people, if you think about mass crafting, you're thinking about the actual crafting reagents themselves, and that is going to be the other node here. So if you are somebody who wants to craft vials, that's going to be a 30-point knowledge point into the processor main node, 30 more knowledge points into Material Manufacturer, so that's 60, and then lastly another 30 for a total of 90 into Boldly Basic. Of course, multicraft is very, very useful, so you're going to want to make sure you max that out, and of course, if you are somebody who's doing this for concentration crafting, you're going to want to max out concentration as well. I will say, personally, I made a ton of gold through mass crafting jewel crafting reagents. I actually crafted level 2s. I didn't even mass craft the quality 3s. A lot of the times, of course, whenever that was profitable and whenever I had enough skill, maxing out the quality and being able to mass craft the max quality was very, very good. It was pretty pricey, but the margin was good, so it's also very, very rewarding. So I would personally say I'm hoping that reagents are going to do just as good as Midnight. That's probably what I'm going to be going into, prospecting as well as reagent crafting. But with that out of the way, let's get into the last final specialization, which is all of your gem cutting needs. Now, in terms of gem cutting, the actual specialization is very, very simple. The tree is probably the scariest looking specialization tree of the expansion, but because there's so many nodes, it's actually pretty simple, and it really just depends on exactly what gem you want to craft. Now, let me quickly pause right here and talk about something that I don't fully understand, and if you guys have any feedback or have any ideas yourself, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. If we take a look at the old War Within specialization tree, it looked very similar to this, and if you look at the actual nodes themselves, you'll see that the middle node gave skill points to basically cutting every single gem, regardless of type, including Blasphemite, which is the epic meta gem of War Within. And if you look at the sub-nodes, so the inner nodes for all the different gem types, you'll see that it gives skill for that specific type of gem, as well as Blasphemite. If you take a look at it in Midnight, you'll see that this simply only gives you skill when crafting that specific gem, and it doesn't mention anything about the meta gems. So if we go and take a look at one of these recipes, let's say we take a look at the Flawless Quick Lapis, you'll see that it costs 400 skill, or it requires 400 skill for me to craft this at max quality. Each gem has a slightly different skill value just depending on what gem it is, so you'll see that the Flawless Versatile one only requires 325, but you'll see that the other Flawless ones require 400, which is a pretty large amount of skill. And this is pretty comparable to the War Within. Now, if we take a look at the War Within Blasphemite skill level, you'll see that it is higher than these normal cuts, because Blasphemite is the high quality epic gem. It requires a lot of skill points, and you'll see that difference on screen now from the War Within. However, if we take a look at these Eversong diamonds in Midnight, their recipe difficulty is only 280, which is very, very weird. I'm convinced that potentially this is just something that they need to fix. Like I said, the prospecting hotfix just happened that completely removed a ton of knowledge points, so maybe this is something that they are going to fix or change in the future, but currently these Eversong diamonds require a very low amount of skill. And so let's say we wanted to craft these Eversong diamonds. If we unlock the gem tree right here, and we put 30 points into the main node, and hit apply. If we take a look at one of these Eversong diamonds, we are at 240 skill, meaning if we had the profession equipment granting us 40 skill, we'll be able to guarantee quality 2. Remember, the other trees, the other specialization tabs don't give skill bonus to cutting gems, meaning this is simply a 30-point investment, and then of course having max profession tools and also max level, but that is a 30 points of knowledge to maximize the ability to craft the high-end meta gem. This just doesn't seem right in my opinion, but that is currently how it is, and right now that is just as simple as it gets. So theoretically, I'm gonna assume this changes, but right now, if you just put 30 points into the main gem node, you'll be able to guarantee your meta gems. From here on, it's simply just choosing what sort of gem you want to craft. For example, let's say the Masterful Garnet, which gives critical strike and mastery, ends up on the best in slot list, and this is going to be a gem that people really want. What you're going to have to do is simply find the node on the tree for Masterful Garnet and max it out. For example, if we take a look, we'll go to Garnet over here, and we'll take a look, boom, the middle one is Masterful Garnet, and this requires 15 knowledge points to max out that node. There we go. Not only is this going to give us a bunch of skill for every single knowledge point, but this actually gives us the recipe. bunch more skill, and then finally at the end it's going to give us another plus 15, as well as the ability to use less concentration. So regardless of if you're going to mass craft this or do concentration crafts for this, you definitely want to max out this bottom node to get that 5% less bonus. If you're somebody who is going for maximum skill, what you'll want to do is maximize the middle node for, in this case, the Glorious Garnet. That's going to require 25 points. From here, you'll get some other bonuses as well. When you put 15 points in, you'll unlock that Prism recipe, which just gives you a handful of garnets. And then lastly, at the very end, you'll see that you'll be able to get some like shavings that you can crush for gem dust, so like that just saves you a little bit of gold. You'll get some other stat bonuses, and then of course you'll consume 5% less concentration. But with that direct 3 nodes maxed out, so 15 knowledge points plus 25, so that's 40 knowledge points plus 30, so for 70 knowledge points, if we take a look back at this recipe, we were at 360. If I had that 40 other knowledge points, we would be hitting that 400 mark, and we would be guaranteeing quality 2. And that's really it for this. So from here, because I maxed out the middle node, I can go ahead and learn the other garnets. I can decide to either max those out, or I can move on to the other type of gems. Like I said, I highly recommend taking a look at the best in slot list to figure out what gems are going to be highly sought after. But yeah guys, that's about it for jewel crafting. Hopefully this made enough sense, but also kind of let you be aware of some weird things happening with this profession. If you are somebody who really wants to dive into concentration, I highly recommend checking out my enchanting video. Not necessarily for the enchanting itself, but I really go deep in depth about concentration builds and how you need to be careful about where you put your points into, and that really works for all the professions. So I didn't really dive into it here per se because it's going to just be repeat knowledge. So if you are somebody who really wants to dedicate themselves to concentration crafts, I highly recommend checking at least the specialization alt army part of that video. But yeah guys, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Let me know what profession you want to see next. I know I see a lot of people asking for alchemy. That is definitely going to be either the next or the second to next. I see you, I know you guys want it. But everybody, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, have a great day.